2023 is being widely reported and talked about as one of the best years in gaming, and now that we're in its final stretch, I have to say that yeah, it's been a great year. If you're watching this video in 2024 and some tragedy struck the world of gaming in the time between the upload of the video and the end of 2023, thus making it an awful year for gaming, then just pretend I haven't started talking yet and the video's just been some seconds of cool clips or whatever. Funnily enough, while the year had incredible titles, it also had some of the most abysmal releases ever. But we're not here to talk about any of those, or the AAA scene in general, nah. We're here to talk about indies, which also had an absolutely unreal year in terms of quality releases. So much so that I actually had a lot of trouble getting my selection down to the 10 that I'm highlighting in this video. Well, sorta. You're probably noticing while I've been talking that there's been at least a couple of different games on your screen. These, and the ones during the outro, are games that I won't talk about, but deserve to show up in a list that showcases the best releases of the year anyway. See, whenever I do my monthly lists, and especially a best of the year list, I try to showcase games that I loved, but that didn't get too much attention. Unfortunately, not all make the cut because my time to edit is limited, and so I try to showcase the ones that I couldn't talk about but are just as good in segments like the intro and the outro. Another thing is that Dredge, Pizza Tower, and other high-profile indies are great and deserving of the love they have, but you likely already know about them. Heck, they'll likely be included in many lists like this one, that's why I don't really showcase them in videos like this. For my video, I selected 10 titles that have at most 5k reviews on Steam at the time of writing. Some of them are dangerously close to 5k, so by the time you're watching they may well be past 5k reviews, but just know that wasn't the case when I was making the video, alright? And believe you me, those are just the outliers. Most of the titles on this list are well below the 5k mark, with a few under 1k and perhaps even one or two titles under 100 reviews. Again, these are titles that are incredibly underrated and that I wish had gotten more attention because they certainly deserve it. I also try to keep the genres varied so that hopefully everyone can find at least one new game they enjoy. Something else to note is that almost nothing that exists is a must-play in life. Tastes change, and as such, so does whatever is a must-play for someone. With this in mind, what I qualify as a must-play are games that either do something really innovative or games that do whatever non-innovative thing they decide to do extremely well. But perhaps most importantly, these are the games that I had the most fun playing. Last, but certainly not least, this list is not indicative of the game's quality. There's no specific order to the titles displayed here, it's just the order in which I wrote the bits in the script. Alright, without further ado, let's get to it. Every so often you come across a game that has such a unique setting that you just can't help but be instantly intrigued. Even rarer are the moments in which the game lives up to everything you thought and goes way past it too. For me, this was the case with A Space for the Unbound. The game takes place in a village in the late 90s rural Indonesia, but the game doesn't stop at just creating a unique setting, oh no. It actually nails every element from it too, with time-bound jokes like the internet going down because someone got a phone call to really precise cultural references such as Kerangkong music, which is an Indonesian style that uses an instrument of the same name. But the setting is not the only thing that's fascinating. While the storyline is a slow burn, boy does it pay off, even with its reliance on some cliches. At its core, this is a story that explores the relationship between two high school kids, Atma, who you play as, and Raya, or Raya, I actually don't know how to pronounce that. While it sells itself as a slice-of-life adventure, it's also so much more than that, involving supernatural powers and even a threat to everyone's own existence. I'll leave it there because I don't wish to spoil anyone, but just know that the story gets absolutely insane in a good sense. And via its exploration of anxiety, depression, and feelings of regret, the story also gets emotional enough for lots of Steam reviews to mention how much they cried at the end of the 10 or so hour journey. The graphics are absolutely gorgeous, employing even animated cutscenes on key moments that are just a delight to see. The soundtrack is equally as good and always fitting to whatever is happening on camera. At times calming, at times upbeat, and at times urging the player to continue onwards as fast as possible. I could go on and on about this game, and I actually did on a review made specifically for it in January of 2023. I'll link it both on screen and on the description if you want to learn more. Just know that this was one of my favorite stories this year, and it's one I won't soon forget. And hey, if you're still not convinced, here. This game has around 20 cats you can pet and name. I bet you're sold on the game now, so, let's move on. This incredible horror visual novel gives the player one simple task: slay the princess. Doesn't matter how you do it, and trust me, there are many ways to succeed and fail, you just have to get it done. While there are many more branches and choices than your average visual novel, this is still a game within that genre, so expect to read and choose options throughout your whole experience. In fact, that's the whole gameplay, your choices will lead you down vastly different paths. Why should you listen to a disembodied voice, the narrator, telling you to go kill a random lady? Why shouldn't you? What else can you even do? Despite being a horror visual novel, it may very well be within the comedy genre too. The premise of slaying a princess to save the world is so out of the ordinary that the game leans heavily into the absurdity of it all. This rate, combined with absolutely outstanding writing, results in a both funny and scary experience that I won't soon forget. If you're still not convinced by what you're seeing and hearing, I should also point out that the game has a great soundtrack, incredible animations and black and white art, as well as a kick-ass narrative that will see your character meeting all sorts of ends. Oh, and the game is fully voice acted, with great performances across the board.
You're here to slay her.
Wait, what?
She will do everything in her power to stop you.
Well, yeah. I don't want to die.
If you're wondering about length, this can last you anywhere from 3 to 10 hours, with some people reaching 15. It will really depend on whether or not you want to go for all possible endings. Look, it's hard to make a visual novel seem incredibly interesting in a video, especially when I can't show its best parts due to the fear of spoiling them for you, but I do hope you'll take my word for it when I say that this is one of the best gaming experiences I've had in a long time, and give this game a shot. It really deserves a lot of success, and thankfully it seems to be getting it, as it's one of the most popular titles on my list. But I honestly think it deserves even more, which is why it's here, despite it being dangerously close to my 5k reviews on Steam threshold at the time of writing. If you might be even remotely interested in what you saw and heard here, please do give Slay the Princess a chance. Fading Afternoon is a special title in this list for a couple of reasons. The first is how I actually found out about this game. The developer tweeted very recently that this game was blowing up in China, and yet they got absolutely no extra sales from that. I'll leave the tweet in the description, but it's wild that 2 million views equals no boost in sales when people don't link the work they are promoting. In this case, the main creator behind the views apparently uses existing games to create an original story from clips, so promotion's not a goal, but it's still insane to think that no extra sales were made from 2 million views. I then played Fading Afternoon and man, it deserves all the extra sales in the world. I can't quite speak on what makes this game magic without ruining a bit of said magic, but I'll do my best. You play as Seiji Maruyama, a middle-aged Yakuza. The game starts with you being released from prison and going back into Yakuza life. At first, you might be a bit confused because you don't have quite a clear goal and are just left to free roam the city via train fast travel. However, that's the whole point. See, this game has choices. How you choose to spend your time will affect how the game plays out, and there are many different endings to be found. I haven't gotten to multiple playthroughs yet, but I'm seeing reports that each playthrough actually feels fresh due to how many different paths you can take. But I hear you asking, how do I take these paths? Well, when you do go on the train, you can choose through different destinations to visit, with more unlocking as you make your way through your chosen path. In these locations, you may find characters that will give you ideas on what you can do, but you really are free to choose. You may engage in the game's beat-em-up combat by starting turf wars with other Yakuza families to take back some territory for your family. You may work on your relationships, and you may even take the time to just relax and enjoy the view, reminiscing about life with this game's gorgeous pixel art and outstanding soundtrack. Whatever you choose to do, I can assure you it will give you plenty to do for hours. Due to the multiple endings, it's tough to give you an estimate for the time the game lasts, but I've seen some 7 hours for a first playthrough or so, and plenty of reviews on the dozens of hours from people who just want to experience more and more ways to journey, and who just can't get enough of the world created here. This is a game to immerse yourself in and take your time, which won't be to everyone's taste, but it certainly was for me. If you were on the internet in the early 2000s and perhaps late 90s, Videoverse is absolutely for you. The developers cite Miiverse, MSN Messenger, and early internet forums as inspirations for this, so you just know that you're in for a trip down the memory and nostalgia lanes upon playing this game. And yeah, that was absolutely my experience, and I wasn't even too involved in these scenes. Videoverse is somewhat of a visual novel, but with a lot of interactivity. I'll explain. In it, you take control of Emmett as he browses social media. Look, I promise the concept and the story are both really good. Basically, there's this system, the Kinmoku Shark. It can both be used as a gaming system with top-tier titles such as Feudal Fantasy, and as a portal to access the Videoverse social media where fans of the system can chat with each other and post fan art to specific forums. The story progresses via checking posts out, replying to them, reporting bad apples, and of course chatting with your friends via the MSN-like messenger. Hell, there's even a really cool feature in which Emmett and his chatting partner can both turn on their cameras and see each other while they type. And the animations for the character portraits when chatting is really good, down to the very detail of them looking to their side and clearly talking to someone off screen before saying they have to go. In fact, the game is full of detail-oriented features. There are so many references to popular franchises within your mate's profiles, and there's even a drawing recreating that one heartbreaking scene from Pokemon. You know the one. And this is on top of easily the best art style in this list, and a low-stakes but very personal story that kept me hooked throughout the game's 3 to 4 hours. This is about online friendships, and yes, it may also be about their fragility. I urge you to give Videoverse a shot, as it really deserves way more attention than it has been getting. Let me just say it's really hard for me to resist the temptation to just play the many incredible tracks from Cassette Beast's OST for this entire section of the video. Like, the soundtrack is so damn good that I genuinely think hearing it is enough to convince anyone to get this game. It's really up there with Persona, The World Ends With You, Kingdom Hearts, and other franchises renowned for their soundtracks, and I'm not even kidding. This is also my favorite game of the year by a long shot, and it's criminal that it doesn't get the attention it deserves. And yes, I say this while fully knowing that this is perhaps the most well-known title on this list. Cassette Beasts is a game kinda like Pokemon, which is far from a perfect explanation, but it's the one that most of you will instantly get. You catch monsters and you fight as them. And yes, I said as. When I claimed the Pokemon comparison was far from a perfect explanation, this is one of the things I meant. You actually turn into the monsters you have in your party. But it goes so much farther than that. Types often interact with each other. For example, a fire-type attack melts plastic-type enemies, turning them into poison types. These interactions can also buff and debuff enemies and, of course, yourself. Furthermore, you always have one companion with you, which you can choose between some 5 or 6 other characters. A huge part of the game is that both of you can fuse together to create an entirely new Cassette Beast. And yes, every single monster can be fused with every single other monster, creating thousands of possible combinations. What the developers did here is nothing short of impressive, but I haven't even talked about the best part. The name Cassette Beasts actually comes from the monsters themselves, which are caught using cassette tapes that you can then play to transform into the monsters. Thus comes the best part, the commitment the game has to its theme and its attention to detail. I'll let you find all the little references in game, but for example, the item that's used to heal your monster is, believe it or not, a pencil. To those of you who weren't alive in the 90s, that's because people back then used to fit whatever they could into the tape holes to rewind them. Oftentimes, that object was a pencil. Honestly, it's the attention to detail and things like these that make this game a joy to play. There is much more I could say, like delving into the monster designs, which are incredible, and the story, which was my favorite in this entire year, but we're running out of time for this section of the video. So I'll just leave you with this. Check the game out. If you're into Pokemon and monster taming games, I promise you, you will not regret it. I'm a sucker for a good action platformer, so as soon as I saw people complimenting Gravity Circuit, and especially comparing it to Mega Man X and Zero, I just had to give it a shot. And honestly, I regret nothing, this is an absolutely amazing title, hence why it's on the list. The gameplay loop is just as you would expect from one of the classic Mega Man games. You get a selection of stages that you can tackle in any order you want. Each stage has a theme, and the game does an incredibly good job of committing and gradually introducing said theme. Take a look at the stage, for example, which has an electricity theme. It starts off giving you an idea of what you're gonna run into with these metal panels that electrify you if they receive, well, a discharge of electricity, and by the end of the stage you will be running through various of these panels non-stop. At the end of each stage you will also find a boss which, wouldn't you guess, is the very embodiment of said theme. In this case, obviously electricity. Look, if you're a fan of this genre, this game really has it all. The movement is extremely tight, with lots of options both from the get-go, like a grappling hook, and unlockable later on, like a double jump. The stage design is also great, and levels can get pretty challenging in their later half, but never unfair. They also never overstay the welcome, and you can usually knock each one out within 30 minutes of starting it. Probably less if you're better at this game than I am. The art style is awesome, the soundtrack is very reminiscent of the games it draws inspiration from, and if the game is too easy or hard, you even have difficulty levels to choose from. If you'll miss Mega Man 0 and X, I urge you to consider Gravity Circuit. Capcom sure won't service any more of those, and this game is bound to scratch that itch for some 5 to 8 hours of gameplay just to get through the main story. More if you like the game and want to keep engaging with it. Decarnation is a fascinating addition to the list. Not because of its gameplay per se, as most people tend to see it as average, perhaps even a bit annoying at times. You basically play the game as Gloria, exploring your surroundings and partaking in many different minigames and mostly puzzles. Even the fights against the monsters that lurk in Gloria's head are puzzles. As such, the game is very easy and, might I add, slow-paced. This is definitely not for everyone, but hoo boy, it definitely hit all the right spots for me. See, while the gameplay might not be anything to write home about, everything involving its presentation certainly is. This game has some of the most intricate animations I've seen this year, managing to convey a massive range of emotions via the most minute changes. Take a look at the expressions that go through Gloria and her partner's faces and surroundings in the scene, for example. The soundtrack and sound design are top tier and even include tracks from Akira Yamaoka of Silent Hill and plenty other games fame. And while the art style may be adorable and overall a delight, make no mistake, this is a horror game and quite a disturbing one at that. In fact, let me be even more specific. This is a psychological horror game in which a good chunk of the time is spent within the protagonist's nightmares. Given her shitty life situation, described by the Steam store page as cabaret dancer at the end of her rope, it's absolutely fascinating to see what Gloria thinks and feels reflected within her nightmares. And trust me, there is a lot to see in there, as the devs pay a lot of attention to detail, a fact which remains consistent throughout the game's 7 hours or so of playtime. Despite Decarnation's gameplay shortcomings, it's still worth taking a look for any horror fans who might be listening. Humanity has you playing as a Shiba Inu. That's it, that's my whole sales pitch for this game. However, I'll keep talking anyway because I really like this game and the more I get to say about it, the better. To put it simply, Humanity is one of the most unique puzzle games I've ever played, period. Like I mentioned, you play as a Shiba. You are a being of pure light and your job is to guide an unending horde of people who follow your every command. They all exit from a portal and walk in a straight line, eventually falling off the map in droves, which is an absolutely hilarious sight. Huh, am I a bit of a sadist? Am I having this realization in the middle of a Best Indies of the Year video? You know what, I'll just think about that later. Basically, true to life, people in this game are quite dumb, and as such you need to put commands in front of them to get the horde to do certain actions. If you place an arrow in a tile, they will change directions and walk in the direction of the arrow. If you place the command to jump, they will jump while moving forward. As you progress through the game's 90 story stages, you unlock more and more commands, and the stages get more and more intricate. The game does a good job at introducing each mechanic though, so don't worry. Humanity gets quite challenging at times, especially if you want to find all goldies within each stage, which are basically golden giants that act as collectibles. But if you want even more challenge, worry not, as the game also has user-generated content that can range from insanely cool to incredibly difficult. So really, there's something for everyone. On other aspects, the game is very relaxing and I love its presentation. Seeing hordes of people constantly flooding the map never ever gets old. If you're wondering about playtime, it can vastly vary depending on how good or bad you are at puzzles, but the average seems to be 12 hours for the story. And if you have PlayStation Plus Extra, rejoice as the game is available as part of your subscription. One of the biggest surprises of the year for me was actually Figment 2: Creed Valley. For those unfamiliar, this is the second game in the, well, at least so far, duology, about a world that resides within the human mind. This is, by itself, already an incredible setting in my opinion, as it allows for all sorts of metaphors and symbolism that some players may identify with. Plus, I love it when media of any sort explores a person via a world inside their mind. But then you add all the gameplay elements to the setting and the result is one of the most charming games in this list, and I really do not say that lightly. The gameplay itself isn't anything to write home about, it's serviceable. It's basically, as the store page puts it, an action-adventure game. You'll be controlling Dusty, the courage inside the human's mind. A second player can, if you so wish, control the bird that's always accompanying Dusty, which is called Pipe. The game is mostly linear, so you'll spend your time progressing the path with some limited but still interesting exploration, alongside some puzzle solving and combat sections. It's all very simple and not too challenging. But that's okay, as challenge and high skill ceilings are not what this game's trying to deliver. Instead, it offers the player a chill and charming experience that will cling to their minds for a while, if they're anything like me anyway. And I cannot stress the charm enough. Aside from the incredible setting, which the developers of Bedtime Digital manages to use very well, the game is also gorgeous to look at, has humorous and light-hearted dialogue which alleviates the introspection caused by the storyline, and above all else it has music! That's right, this is a 3 to 4 hour long adventure that has a few musical numbers sprinkled in it, even within boss fights. I genuinely believe that every single one of these moments is a highlight of the game. The performances are just great. Look, I want to keep gushing about Figment 2, but I promised I'd limit myself to 3 paragraphs per game. If you want to know more though, do check out my full review of the game here in this very YouTube channel. Link in the description and on screen right now. And if you still want to see more here, I'll leave you with a very small clip of one of my favorite performances before we move on to the next game.
Your obscure wickedness is what shadows hide. Don't underestimate the power of the dark side.
Killer Frequency is perhaps one of the most unique titles in this list, so it feels fitting to have it close the list off. You play as DJ Forrest Nash as he commandeers a radio show alongside his producer, Peggy. The devs describe the genre as horror comedy, and I have to say that's rather accurate. I mean, have you seen the lunatics that call and speak on the radio sometimes? Equal parts horrifying and hilarious. I'm being a fool though, that's not actually what the game's about. The comedy comes from good old writing and jokes or amusing situations every once in a while. The horror, on the other hand, comes from the calls. And I think it's more accurate to say that it's a thriller rather than actual horror, but I digress. See, the police chief in a tiny town is found dead and a killer's on the loose. As the only 911 operator heads to a neighboring town to find help, she redirects all 911 calls to you, the only other person in town capable of running phone lines, as, you know, it's part of your job. As such, it's up to the player to keep people alive by giving them the correct instructions. Morbidly enough, some failures, despite resulting in the caller's death, can also be quite funny, which I definitely didn't find out by making very obvious mistakes to see what would happen. No, I would never do that. The way you actually help people is very simple. You hit some buttons on your DJ station to run the show according to Peggy's instructions. When someone calls, you have to choose the options you think will lead them to safety. Sometimes the options are timed, so you better think fast. Other times you won't have all the info you need, so while the caller is hiding, you'll have to run around the office to find information relevant to the situation at hand. This gameplay will be boring to some of you, as at its core you're sitting and just choosing options with quite a bit of downtime between calls sometimes. However, the strength of the game lies in its tale and writing. If you let yourself be immersed in the thrilling and entirely voiced story for the 5 or so hours the game lasts, you probably will really enjoy your experience. I know I did. And that's it. I genuinely feel like 2023 was one of the best years we've had in a long time for both AAA and indie gaming, so getting this list down to 10 games was extremely hard. I had to cut a lot of games either due to popularity or due to simply not having enough slots. Still, just a reminder that both during the intro sequence and this outro sequence, I'm showing a lot of the other titles that were left out of the video but that I enjoyed just as much. For now though, I'll leave you all with a question. What did you enjoy playing this year? Not asking for a top 10 because I know from experience these are really damn tricky to make sometimes, but really just an experience that you had that you would like to highlight. I'm always looking for new things to play, so I always enjoy reading your responses to my videos. Oh, and another question, what did you think of my list? Did you find anything new to play? Have you played any of the titles and feel like you want to comment on them? Let me know. With that though, I'm out of here. If you enjoyed this video, if it was useful to you, please do leave a like and subscribe, as both actions really help out my channel. But if you must only choose one thing to do, drop a comment, as I love hearing what you all have to say. Thank you so much for watching, and, onwards to another great year of gaming. Bye bye!